at the translation about Indonesia. So Jakarta prepares for a leap. Here is one interesting thing. The Chinese consist of about 3 to 6%. Yeah, the Chinese consist of, I don't like that actually. The Chinese make up about 3 to 6% of the population of Indonesia. Yeah, I would say that. The Chinese make up about 3 to 6% of the population of Indonesia, but it is them who control the lion's share of business and own 68% of the 300 largest conglomerates of the country. Of course, this doesn't mean that the Chinese Indonesians control almost 70% of the Indonesian economy, but their share in the economy is significant and statistically doesn't correlate with their share of the population. I would put it like that, because then you've got their share in the economy doesn't correlate with their share of the population. Notice you've got their share and then prepositional phrase, their share and then prepositional phrase. It's parallel. Okay, this factor until recent years had become a reason for frequent interethnic conflicts. The Chinese are not Muslim. Meanwhile, they control the Indonesian market and, according to the opinion of the majority of the population, are in charge of everything that happens to the country's economy, including the welfare of the citizens. Okay, guys, the Chinese are not Muslim is a main clause. And meanwhile, they control blah, 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 blah is a main clause. So that's a comma splice. That's why I'm changing it to a semicolon. Yeah, it's got to be a semicolon. Thus, an anti-Chinese movement accompanied by violence has turned into some kind of ritual practice, which can be precipitated, which can break out by the merest spark. Yeah, I changed this to not by only by the merest spark. It sounds really nice then, which can be precipitated, which can break out. Yeah, this violence against the Chinese can break out. It can be precipitated. Yeah, if you want it passive, you need can be precipitated. But if you want it active, you can say can break out by the merest spark. Yeah, it only takes a little spark. It only takes a small event to spark off, and that means precipitate as well, to spark off a lot, violence, to lead to violence. Okay, unfortunately, this acute problem was not fully solved by Suharto. Anyway, step by step, the Indonesian authorities overcame anti-Chinese sentiments common to the majority of the population. I don't like this big part of, guys, I hear it all the time. It's not right. Yeah, majority is right. And don't say small part of, say minority of. I've seen that mistake very often. Okay, and put successful efforts into society's consolidation. These efforts include the incorporation of the ethnic Indonesians into business entities. The greatest example of this incorporation is Susi Pujiastuti, who has risen through the ranks from a distributor to an influential businesswoman, the Minister of Water Resources and Fishery. I like that A positive at the end. That's nice. But please use capital letters for these people of respect. Yeah, like politicians and people working in the government. They deserve a capital letter, surely. They certainly see themselves as really important people. Okay, another reason for Indonesia's rise is the Cold War, and it's always got an article, the Cold War, because it's defined. This includes the Soviet-American standoff in Korea and American aggression against Vietnam, semicolon, not comma. That's a main clause. These events drew Indonesia into the area of Washington's strategic interests. And as a result, Jakarta got substantial financial assistance from overseas, most likely due to the fact that the USA were seriously, extremely maybe, I found that more natural, extremely afraid of a potential communist victory in the states of the Asia-Pacific region and the dismantling of an American military, political and economic presence in the region. I think my student might have missed out the here because of that lesson I did recently on gerund or verbal noun. But dismantling is used with articles, so it's a verbal noun, it's not a gerund. Just like you can say the reading, the writing, the singing, some gerunds have already become verbal nouns, and the dismantling of, yeah, it's already a verbal noun. Notice that there is no other form. Yeah, with other verbs, you've got like reducing, reduction, separating, separation, interrupting, interruption. But there's no dismantlation. Yeah, it's just dismantling. And so usually if there's only one, then quite often the gerund, it seems to me, when there's only one ing form and there's no other verbal noun, quite often you can use that ing form then as a verbal noun. Yeah, I'm afraid you just have to know with this kind of stuff, guys. It's really tricky, but you just need to know whether they're verbal nouns or not. And so I do appreciate that this is tricky. Okay, let's come back to here. Okay, Japan also stepped in, maybe stepped up or stepped towards cooperation with Indonesia. I think stepped up works best. Japan also stepped up, and it means increased cooperation then. They stepped up cooperation with Indonesia, which allowed Suharto, not this allowed, which allowed, yeah, this is a relative clause, which allowed Suharto to rearrange the modernization policy. As a result, the then existing, not then existed, the then existing course on import substitution was replaced by, well proven in South Korea and Taiwan, an export-oriented strategy. This helped Indonesia not to catch Dutch disease, which implies a decline of the oriental sector, in contrast to the thriving extractive sector. Okay, I changed this to no more a pawn, not more. Yeah, it's got to be no more a pawn, but not yet a queen. Yeah, no more a pawn, but not yet a queen. So you're no longer a pawn anymore, but you're not yet a queen. Okay, now we get back to geopolitics. Above, we have highlighted that Indonesia is a long-run player. Yeah, a long-term player, you might say as well. Long-term player. Yeah, just because they look at the long term. And of course, this is very wise to look at things in the long term, in the long run. Yeah, in the long run, notice we say. Okay, moreover, in a rising Islamic world, Indonesia has become one of the leading powers due to the fact that it has weight, authority, experience, and tools for overcoming problems still unsolved in the rest of the Islamic world. This still unsolved is defining, it's a participle phrase describing problems, and it's defining which problems, which is why I took out that comma. It's defining which problems, the problems that are still unsolved in the rest of the Islamic world. Yeah, there needs to be a dot there. We also have to take into account a great deal of confidence in Indonesia demonstrated by the Western countries and the potency of political influence which it has as the biggest country of the Muslim world. One piece of evidence is uncountable. One piece of evidence clearly illustrating an increasing role, or maybe clearly illustrating the increasingly significant role of Jakarta in the Muslim world, is its plan to build a hospital at a cost of more than $1 million in Afghanistan. It is very important to mention here that Islam is not an official religion in Indonesia, and this fact only strengthens its public image in the eyes of the secular West, multi-confessional Russia, India, mostly Buddhist Southeast Asia, and Communist China. The former colonial empires of the old world, having lost their political dominance, not its, yeah, it's got to be there. Be careful with pronouns. This is referring to empires, plural. So having lost their political dominance on the overseas territories, still tried their best to guard economic interests there. Due to the fact that many former colonies are Muslim countries, the mediating role of Indonesia in difficult inter-civilization dialogue will only increase. Okay, what time have we got at the moment? We're only on 8 minutes. Let's carry on. So Amit's asking which or that. Very easy question to answer this. In British English, defining which or that. Non-defining, only which. Okay, in American English, that defining, which non-defining. So there's a difference here between American English and British English, firstly. But secondly, I do think the Americans are a little bit strict with their relative clauses. I like that they're strict with grammar and they're very interested in grammar far more than British people. But, you know, I have to say, in speech, we do use which or that in relative clauses, in defining relative clauses. And I'm pretty sure they do just like we do. And so I think they've gone a little bit too far with relative clauses. Okay, let's keep going. Change of landmarks. Regarding Russian-Indonesian as well as Chinese-Indonesian geopolitical relations, we should take into account the below factors. The given below factors doesn't work. The factors below... in fact, the factors below sound better to me, the factors below or the factors given. But yeah, I would put this at the end. Russia. It is worth mentioning that last year we celebrated the 70th anniversary of the establishment of Russian-Indonesian diplomatic relations. At present, despite, look, he's got it right here, he hasn't put despite of, He's just put despite and then noun phrase, despite all the efforts of the Indonesian authorities, radical Islam, in line with not yet overcome anti-Chinese sentiments, is a significant challenge for the country. But the lack of the noun of noun, yeah, you can say a lack of as well, because it's a quantifying expression. But here we're being very clear: the lack of unified organisation, common command, and well-defined structure amongst radicals plays into the hands of the government security services. Often Indonesian radicals are divided by contradictions and conflicts based on different points of view on strategy and tactics of their struggle. Semicolon, not comma. Yeah, main clause already got before it and main clause afterwards. Also, personal rivalry, and the noun of noun. The ambitions of ideological leaders and field commanders. Pander to a schism? No, you pander to someone's whim, or you pander to someone's desires, or you pander to the authorities. You can't pander to a schism. Lead to a schism. This problem makes the Indonesian leadership consolidate its counter-terrorism efforts with other states which face the same problem, including Russia, which has a problem of radical Islam in the Northern Caucasus and on the territories near the Volga River. The South Caucasus is too a territory of high concern on which radical Islam can emerge as a result of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. Mass media have mentioned many times that armed insurgents from Syria took part in this conflict on the side of Azerbaijan. Meanwhile, military experts have written about the participation of the Indonesian fighters in the Syrian conflict. This means that their relocation to the region of the South Caucasus is quite real. We can even go further. I never say farther. I know you see it in the dictionary sometimes, but further, I don't like that farther. I don't like it. We can go even further and say that if the destabilization of the situation in the southwest and the west of post-Soviet territories keep on, they can possibly emerge in the Donbass area, or even in Belarusia, which is being pushed by Western masterminds into the abyss of civil war by applying the conception of controlled chaos in close vicinity to the Russian borders. Hence, the necessity to fight, no, it's not a necessity, it's the necessity to fight international terrorism has become the cornerstone of the allied Russian-Indonesian approach. 3 years ago, Moscow and Jakarta, and yeah, I didn't like point, has become the cornerstone, yeah, meaning has become the strongest part, the main support of the alliance, yeah, of Russia and Indonesia. 3 years ago, Moscow and Jakarta agreed to consolidate their, be careful with pronouns, yeah? Moscow and Jakarta agreed to consolidate their special agencies' activities on fighting the Islamic State. In this particular case, we can assume combining efforts to counteract American special services due to the fact that there are reasons to believe their direct overseeing, no, their direct supervision of the jihadists, yeah? So you can see that in this essay, they're clearly pointing out that it's the American special services that actually supervise the Islamic radicals, the Islamic jihadists. And I actually have personal experience of this as I sat next to a guy at school who became a radical Muslim, but I'm sure that he's actually just controlled and manufactured by our media, by our security services. So I have absolutely no doubt that this is certainly the case. And it follows the same logic if Washington leads the jihadists' activities on the territory of Indonesia, in case the latter keeps on increasing its military cooperation with Russia. As a matter of fact, the last factor, not thing, yeah, the last factor that plays, yeah, I feel like there needs to be, that plays a key role in bilateral. The last factor plays a key role in bilateral relations because of the relative weakness of the Indonesian military-industrial complex, and additionally due to the fact that Jakarta is interested in close contacts with a state which, yeah, we're defining which state here, so it's going to be a state, no comma, defining relative clause, a state which doesn't intend to change force balance in the region and doesn't drag the country into unfavourable coalitions and unions. Russia, unlike China and America, fully fits the description of such a country. It is worth saying that the cooperation between Moscow and Jakarta has a long history, not a long story, a long history, stretching back to the 60s, when, with assistance of the USSR, Indonesia achieved parity with the Netherlands in the western part of New Guinea Island. Nevertheless, not though here. Though goes at the end when it's being used adverbially, and it doesn't go at the start. Maybe rarely, but I wouldn't put it there. It doesn't sound good there. I prefer nevertheless. Nevertheless, the Kremlin wound the military technical cooperation down after Suharto had launched repressions against communists in the mid-60s. 30 years later, Americans helped to resume this cooperation, maybe the Americans, by imposing an embargo on armaments supply to Indonesia after Jakarta had accomplished several military operations against the separatists in East Timor and was accused of human rights violations by Washington. We should note that such a short-sighted policy of the White House was a result of a relative degeneration of the American elites, who, not which, guys, be careful with who and which, it's people, who were too relaxed after the victory in the Cold War and fully believed in their almightiness and permissiveness, and they also didn't notice the speedy growth of China's military economic potential. Okay, we're going to stop there for the moment because we've still got 2 pages left, and I'm going to put this in the next video, guys. Okay, let's see what some of the questions are. If we use 2 or 3 words together, we will use 1, 2, 3 rule. First adverb plus adjective plus noun. We can use it for the objective, transitive verb, and also prepositional objects. Okay, fair enough. Okay, not sure what that means, but okay, very good person. Yes, I agree that the adverb will always come before the adjective that it describes, and the adjective will always come before the noun it describes, or more or less always. There are actually times when that's not the case, though. For example, blessed is he who watches my lessons. Yeah, blessed is describing he, but notice the inversion. Blessed is he. And so you can get other forms, other patterns, other structures, and not just adverb, adjective, noun. You will see other forms and other versions, especially in literature. Yeah, I am under the weather today, I am certainly. My whole family has come down with a nasty cold. And so I'm sure in a few days' time it will clear up. I'm sure my symptoms will clear up in a few days. Okay, I'm going to do another class in a second, guys. Hang around if you want to read or learn about the last 2 pages of Jakarta's geopolitics. Okay, so 1 second and I'll be